Rather than pulling in global talent, bonkers visa rules have in fact fuelled low-wage migration. So finds a recent report by the Independent Migration Advisory Committee. Rules were introduced for postgraduates on visas, allowing foreign students and their dependents, believe it or not, to work in the UK for 2 years after graduating. Turns out, just like we told you, that was pretty stupid. For heaven's sake, of course it was. I'm now joined by former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Very good evening to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. I have to start off with, Ben, the idea that migration has become a problem that the Conservative government can seemingly not fix. It's now such a boring kind of template that we have to talk about. I don't know where to go with it.
Well, it's a function, I think, of a number of different things. An inability to recognise the need to promote the British workforce. Yeah. A failure in understanding that it's not just supporting GDP that matters, it's GDP per capita or per hour worked. A complete collapse in an understanding of what the social fabric of the United Kingdom means. Yeah. And also falling into this trap that somehow immigration is some sort of panacea for growth, when actually, ultimately, all it does is bring a bigger burden on infrastructure, a bigger burden on our public services, a bigger burden on housing, and immigrants get old too. Yes. And they need care when they get older.
And they won't have paid into the system in the same way as the money they're going to take out.
So it's a kind of, you undermine the British worker, you bring in lots of unskilled workers, you keep our economy working on a third world economic model, and then you have a huge number of costs you need to meet in order to look after these people. It's a Ponzi scheme that simply doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. Henry, I mean, this idea that you could bring dependents with you, we discovered this, you probably knew it long ago, but we discovered this, I would say, I don't know, a couple of months ago, that people coming here as students were actually bringing loads of people with them in some ludicrous ideal that the government had given them, so that they could not only bring people that were more dependent than they were on the state, but they would become further dependent on the state and would probably stay here for longer. And I mean, we're only now discovering that this was a stupid idea. I mean, who on earth would have thought that it was a good one?
I have no idea, Mike. Absolutely no idea at all. The only idea that I can think of why anybody would possibly think of this is rather ideological. Let's open up Britain to educating the world and benefiting the world. You know, there is a school of thought, I know, within certain parts of government, particularly the Department for International Development, that the money that migrants who are here send back to their countries actually helps development in those countries. That might be a legitimate argument. However, that's money going out of the United Kingdom, not staying in the United Kingdom. So it is yet another draw on the British economy of the sort that Ben has just been talking about. The numbers of the weight on the British economy in all manner of respects is absolutely massive, even if some of these people pay their taxes. But of course, students aren't really paying their taxes, and their dependents are probably not paying for them, paying taxes either. They're probably on benefits.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It turns out that most of the money that comes into the country goes to private sort of, educational institutions, Ben. And so the university is doing very well, thank you very much indeed, and they just keep wanting to bring more and more people in. But the rest of us are picking up the tab. I mean, I go back in the beginning of the Blair years when all the Polish people came to Britain. Remember when he said 15,000 Polish people will come?
A million
and a million came. I mean,
came.
that is an underrepresentation, quite remarkable confines. But worse than that, I happened to have a young baby at the time, and who was in a kindergarten nearby in near Edinburgh, where I was living, and practically all the other kids in the kindergarten were Polish, and they were getting the mothers would talk to the mother of my son and say, "Oh yeah, we get child benefit, we send it all back to Poland."
Great, terrific.
So fantastic, because they didn't even have to be born here. They just had to bring the kids with them, and they would apply for child benefit and they would get it. And I mean, it might not be loads of money, but if it's happening with about sort of 500,000 people, that's a lot of money disappearing.
Well, you know what was quite interesting, Mike, is I set up a business in Poland in 2005. We kind of shut down our UK operations and we started in Poland because we could see with Poland having joined the EU that it was just a money transfer system. And I thought, well, I might as well go to Poland, invest in Poland and get some of our British pounds back to the UK.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's been a phenomenal success.
That's the funny thing. It's an interesting story, that, because I suddenly started buying stock in Polish
Did you?
building.
Well, you saw the same thing.
Because I saw this, because I mean, I remember if I was investing in your company, but anyway, that's another story. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just a transfer.
It's a it's a wealth transfer scheme, and it's our money.
Yeah.
And Poland, by the way, I mean, they are absolutely brilliant at taking advantage of the EU, and good on them for doing so. They get the biggest sums of money out of the EU every year in the entire European Union.
Yeah.
£100 billion over every 7-year period.
Right.
Think about what that does for your economy.
Absolutely.
And think about the damage it does for all the countries that have to cough up that money.
And Britain being one of them.
Britain having been one of them.
We didn't seem to get any benefit whatsoever. It's a bit like, Henry, I always used to complain when I'd go to various different countries, whether it was Spain or Ireland or Portugal or Germany or France. The roads in all those countries were always better than ours. And everyone said, oh, yeah, that's because the EU gives them money to rebuild them. And I'm like, well, why don't we get that? No, we don't get that because we're too rich, apparently.
Yeah, indeed, Mike. I mean, look, you know, that's the whole thing, isn't it? We have been milked throughout this. And for some bizarre reason, we've had a succession of governments that have actually supported the idea.
Yeah, they just rolled over.
Why? It defies belief that they've done this. But the point now, Mike, is that we want to see government, political parties, everybody who's involved in this, wake up, learn the lesson, and actually, in a good traditional conservative manner, and I'm not talking about Conservative Party, I'm talking about old school conservatism, actually work to further the interests of the United Kingdom, further the interests of the British people, and that includes securing our society, our culture, our way of life, our heritage, as the foundations on which society can grow and evolve. And of course, there's a multicultural element to it. Britain has always had immigration and may always have so. But it has to be properly managed, and it has to be managed in a way that does not pose any sort of pressure or threat or strain to the British economy and the infrastructure and the services that provide for the British people.
Yeah.
That cannot happen, because otherwise we are starting to weaken the entire state. And that will only lead us to be coming down to the level of countries that are, sadly, not as well advanced as we are, don't have the same values, don't have the same rule of law, don't have the same security, and so on. So, you know, people have to wake up to this, and I think they are starting to, and I think the Conservative Party is way out of touch on that. Sunak's moved them to the centre. He's busy sort of worrying about, I think he actually believes that immigration is a good idea, but he's trying to sort of bluff his way through all the people in his party who think it's not.
Yes.
And it's not going to work. He's going to get decimated in the election if he doesn't change course rapidly. And I don't see any sign of that.
No, I think that's right. I mean, he only ever really talks about illegal migration. He only ever talks about how he's managed to slow the boats down and that there's only 2/3 as many people coming as there were.
Well, that's because a third of them were Albanians.
Well, that's also true. But I mean, if you saw the Albanian National Day celebration, which brought London to a standstill the other day, there's still plenty of Albanians left here. There's still plenty of them to be sent home. But how about this for you, though? David Cameron today, and I want to hear from both of you on this, Ben. David Cameron, for some reason, I don't understand why the timing of this is done now, but he's basically had a go at extremist Israeli settlers who are basically occupying the West Bank. He says that they target and kill Palestinian civilians. He says that they are undermining security and stability for both Israel and Palestine. But he then announces that we are going to ban these people from coming to Britain. Now, you might say that's a reasonable thing to do. However, when you consider that the former leaders of Hamas and current sort of people who are still quite recently up to speed with supporting Hamas live in this country, one of them lives in North London, a former Hamas leader, the fact that we've got extremists coming over on boats, we know there are terrorists coming on the small boats from all sorts of countries which have jihadis in them. You know, it seems a bit of a weird thing to do because he doesn't ban them.
It's particularly weird from David Cameron. This is a man who enticed the entire North African, North Africa and Syria, Bahrain, Saudi into open revolt, bombed the hell out of Libya, took a state that was admittedly run by a complete lunatic Gaddafi, but he had it under control. Right. He's turned it into a failed state. Cameron turned Libya into a failed state.
And we're still suffering.
And we're still suffering. He turned Syria into a failed state. We might not like the Assad family, but actually they had Syria under control. Yeah. It was a reasonably prosperous and peaceful country. This is a man, Cameron, has done untold damage to world peace. For him to get up on his high horse and talk about the damage the Israelis are doing in the West Bank is so disconnected with his own past and what's going on, you know, in the Middle East generally. He's an unbelievably awful man. And the fact that he's back in government, the fact that Rishi Sunak couldn't find a foreign secretary in amongst his MPs that he could trust to do the job is absolutely symptomatic of a broken Conservative Party. Cameron should be nowhere near office.
No.
He failed on his campaign for Remain. He failed the country and he just ditched it when he couldn't get his way. He's bombed the hell out of the Middle East. He's significantly responsible for the immigration problems we face today. And he is now being entrusted with our foreign policy, apparently because he's experienced. Sure, a lot of bad experience.
Bad experience is worse than no experience.
Bad experience. And he's going to take us close to the EU. He's going to take us closer and closer and closer. And that's not what we want. What we wanted, which Henry explained so well, is British policies made for British national interest with the British people's interests at heart. That's what we want. We want a government that looks after us.
It's called a British government.
It's called a British government.
I mean, you know, it's a genuinely revolutionary idea for reform. Ben Habib, thank you very much indeed. Henry, I haven't got time to get you back on, but we'll get you back on again soon. Thank you so much.